For a DBE, there are several different responsibilities that they must provide, and that is, of course, performance of the work, management of the work, and the supervision of the workforce. So these should be readily identifiable in the subcontract agreement. So even the field inspectors should have access to the DBE subcontract agreements or purchase orders, because they're going to be your eyes and ears in the field to make sure that these items are actually conducted. We're going to go over each one of these. These are areas of CUF non-compliance, which would be the same: management, equipment, workforce, materials. I will tell you, over the years, I have witnessed non-compliance in all of these, some multiple times, some just a few. But management, if a DBE is not assigning their own crews for projects, if they're letting a prime contractor assign their crews, then they're obviously not managing their own firm. Equipment, if the DBE borrows equipment from the prime or another sub, then they don't own the equipment they need to perform the work they're supposed to conduct, which would be in the subcontract agreement. Their workforce, if the DBE does not employ regular workforce and or borrows workforce from other contractors, this is a non-compliance area. I've seen this many times. Materials, if the DBE does not purchase the required materials to conduct its own work. This has happened numerous times, and it is much stricter now than ever. So you should have bill of ladings, you should have invoices, anything for the materials that the DBE has actually purchased. And we're going to go over each one of these a little more in depth. Red flags, I've kind of mentioned a couple of these already, just to briefly cover them again. If the DBE is, if the work that the DBE is supposed to be performing is done by another contractor, obviously that's a red flag. If the DBE work performed jointly with another contractor, that means that only a portion of the work that the DBE is doing can be counted toward gold. This is a very important diary documentation and notification to the LPA DBE prevailing wage coordinator, so that the tracking can start immediately when it is witnessed that there are other contractors jointly performing the DBE's work. The work that's being performed is outside the DBE's known experience and or capability, and the DBE does not have the correct NAAQS codes to perform the work toward DBE credit. NAAQS code is a North American industry code. Every business has a NAAQS code, all businesses, no matter if they're DBE or not. And the NAAQS codes for DBEs, they can have one or multiples, and those codes can be found readily on the internet. There is a search for that. So if you do need that search capability, then please let us know so that you can ID the NAAQS codes. But when they are being reviewed and approved by ODOT, their NAAQS codes are being looked at with the subcontract or purchase order agreement that is received. You should be familiar with the NAAQS codes, just so that you do know that they are performing work inside of what they are capable of doing. Management red flags. If the DBE superintendent is not a regular employee of the DBE, you know, obviously I mentioned that before. If it's a superintendent for the prime contractor and they're supervising the DBE employees and telling them what to do on the project, then obviously that's not a DBE superintendent. That's a prime superintendent and not a regular employee from the DBE firm. The DBE provides little or no supervision of the work. Now, this is somewhat difficult in trucking operations, but you can tell when you talk to the trucking driver that's on the job, who do they report to? Now, sometimes they're going to tell you, well, I report to the contractor. They tell me where to go on the job. That, in fact, is true, but they should be telling you who sent them to the job, who in their office is telling them where to go to work for the next day or for the next week. That's the supervision that we're looking for. If they do not have that type of supervision from their office, that's a management red flag. If the DBE owner is not aware of the status of the work being performed, if you contact the DBE because you have a question about, what the crew's doing on the job or where is the crew, and the DBE owner is not aware of their crew status or the work they're supposed to be doing on the project, that's a definite red flag. Equipment red flags, I mentioned this a little bit as well earlier. Any trucks or equipment used by the DBE that belong to the prime contractor or an affiliate, that's a huge red flag. This occurs on I can't say often basis, but it does occur, and it has occurred and will still continue to occur until we can get people to obey the regulations and make sure they have their own equipment or have long-term lease approved equipment. The trucks or equipment used by the DBE belong to another contractor with no formal lease agreement. As I mentioned, these lease agreements have to be prior approved, and they do have to be long-term. And long-term for federal regulation is at least a minimum of a year. So it cannot be a month-to-month lease or an agreement with another contractor. I'm going to lease your mill for 2 weeks to work on this project, and then I'm going to return it to you. And lease agreements are very in-depth. They must contain language that the DBE is taking possession of the equipment, they are maintaining the equipment, and they are taking care that they have their own employees running the equipment. Obviously, if it's a crane, that's a little different story because most crane companies do not let other contractors use their own employees. So the crane itself may come with its own operator from the crane company. The equipment signs and or markings cover up another equipment owner's identity by using a magnetic sign. Now, this is a very frequent practice, as you can see in this picture, and this is from years ago, but I continue to witness this every year. So this, when you see a magnet, then just pull the magnet up. I have seen all types of violations with covering up other names of companies, and cardboard, duct tape, you name it. There are all different types. There's multiple names on a vehicle. So you ask for the title, you take pictures of all of this information. These are red flags and typically cuff non-compliance issues. The DBE's workforce. As I mentioned before, the DBE must keep a regular skilled workforce. In trucking, that's a little vicarious because we do hear where trucking firms, they have a frequent turnover rate. So regularly skilled workforce, they should at least be employed by the trucking company or whatever DBE firm is working. Employed means they have to have all of the regular employment status applications, all of their IRS forms have to be completed, any policies, procedures, their Bureau of Workers' Compensation, meaning they have to have a drug-free workplace program, those types of policies. That would mean that they are a regular employee of the workforce. If that is not held by the DBE company for their employees, then they are likely not a regular part of the workforce. The DBE cannot share employees with non-DBE contractors, especially an affiliate of the prime contractor. It's a clear violation and a red flag. The DBE must be responsible for all payroll and labor compliance requirements, just like any other contractor, for all of its employees within control of the company. Materials purchased by DBEs. If material is a part of the DBE subcontract agreement, which is going to be called out if it is, let's say they are buying asphalt from an asphalt plant. It's going to call that out in the subcontract agreement. We're going to provide so many tons of asphalt, and we're going to deliver it to the project. The DBE must be responsible for ordering the material and negotiating the cost. That's any material that they are purchasing and providing to the project. Arranging for its delivery and taking possession of the material. They cannot be a pass-through. So this was heavily abused in the past. It's not as much anymore, but it still can take place. So you do need to look at those invoices and bill of ladings and so forth, so that you know that they are taking possession of that material and paying for all materials and supplies that they are providing. Note, materials cannot be drop shipped to the project by the manufacturer unless the DBE is installing the material, or unless written prior approval has been received to do so, and that would be written prior approval from ODOT, and the DBE itself has to request that approval to ODOT. If these conditions aren't met, the DBE will only receive broker credit only, which is typically markup. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3% normally, but it's a broker credit only. As I mentioned previously, we're going to cover Proposal Note 31, prompt payment, and this is for local let construction projects, just like it is for ODOT let projects. As part of the conciliation agreement, this was that ODOT had entered with FHWA back in 2015. This is part of the conciliation agreement that we must track prompt payment. So as a recipient, just as ODOT is, the LPA is a recipient or a sub-recipient of federal money. So we must follow the guidance from the proposal note. It is in your ODOT template that you use with your bidding documents. It's described, it's spelled out, and you do need to monitor it. There was a notice to the industry January 9th in 2016, also June 29th in 2017, December 12th of 2019, and February 10th of 2020, along with training. The prompt payment note itself is guided by the U.S. Department of Transportation's rules related to disadvantaged business enterprises, and it's published in the Code of Federal Regulations 49, Part 26, as I mentioned before. Within that, it also lays out the prompt payment requirements that apply to ODOT, its subrecipients, as I mentioned, that would be a local agency such as yourselves, and by extension, the prime contractors and subcontractors, including any non-DBEs. That means all subcontractors. The prime contractor must comply with the proposal note and the department's prompt payment requirements as published in 107.21 of the Construction and Materials Specifications. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the Construction and Materials Specifications put out by the state of Ohio Department of Transportation, usually biannually, and the last one is 2019. So there are multiple ways of accessing that manual and online on the ODOT's website, as well as other forms of getting your hands on those from the district, or they would be able to provide that manual to you as well.